Logged into our RUCKUS WAN gateway, we're going to walk through some of the UI elements on this device just so we can familiarize ourselves with navigating around and making the configurations. I'm not going to go through every UI option here, but we're going to go through some of them, and then we're going to jump into like the WAN configuration. In my lab, we've got some of the LAN side set up, but we do not have a WAN uplink to the internet just quite yet. So we'll start off by looking at the top right of the page here. We can see the system time, the system name, we see help, we can tell what build we are, and then we can see who we're logged in as, and then go ahead and log out as them. We also have an option to search for anything in the system. We'll be taking a look at the search in a later video where we're talking about some basic troubleshooting. Underneath of that, we have our main menu with a bunch of different drop downs. We'll talk through some of these. So I'm hovering system now, and you can see, admins is where you're going to create your admin accounts, which we walk through. Backups, if you want to take a configuration backup or restore a configuration backup, you can do that here. You can manage certificates, clusters, fleet. So if you have several RWG instances that you want to manage, you can do that from fleet. Licenses we did take a look at. We also have options. I'm going to go ahead and click on options here. From options, you can set some device options. You can see that I've got a device here that I've named. I set the time zone for that. So we can do that here. If I was to edit this, I could jump into those device options. I could set the time zone, change the NTP, things like that. Another cool feature that comes with the RUCKUS WAN gateway is how we have this contextual help kind of everywhere. So anytime you see one of these options with a scaffold with all these different things under it, if you want to know more about that, you can click on the help and it will bring up help directly for that particular scaffold. So you can see here, this starts off saying that the network options scaffold enables configuration of global settings that govern the RWG packet manipulation engine. Okay, that's cool. So you can kind of see here some of the things are bolded. So if you're not sure, what does routed network, DHCP, or what does this configuration do? We can find it up here. We can find what that configuration applies to and figure out, what we need to set to manipulate it the way we want. So we can then close that scaffold and go back through. We can see we've got portals here listed under system. So if we've got captive portals, we could do those configurations and manage those here. And then, things like update. So if we want to update the system software, we could do that as well. And this kind of goes on. So network, we've got our WAN, NAT, LAN, routing, wired, wireless. Wired and wireless are going to be where we do that smart zone integration and that ICX integration. So we will be taking a look at those in a few videos from now, just to show how that configuration works and get that synchronization with those going. We also have location-based services. So if we're doing IoT stuff, we can do that here as well. Speaking of services, under services, we've got DHCP, DNS, Radius, VPN. If you wanted to have this be your VPN endpoint, we can definitely manage VPN tunnels through this. The notifications are here as well. So obviously lots of different events get notified. You can change the parameters of the events, set the thresholds. When do you want to be alerted? What's the threshold? Things like that. We've got IoT hubs. We can do server management, virtualization from in here. Then going over to identity management, we can manage all the tokens and groups and LDAP and Radius stuff, as well as the definitions. We'll get into some of that in a little bit. Then we can look at our policies for our firewalls. So we've got captive portal, content filtering, packet forwarding, all that kind of stuff here. We do have billing as well. So if you want to do property management stuff, that can be done here. Plans, gateways, things like that. We do have archives for all of our logging, and then we do have instrumentation. Lots of cool dashboards on this. So if you want to see dashboards on your Mac, your DHCP, DNS, the connections of your devices, how long your device sessions have been going, what's NAT looking like. You can get into all that stuff here, traffic rates, all good stuff. Also, you can click on any of these top levels and kind of get a graphic overview of this. So if I just click on instruments, you can see that we're taken back to that uplink. If we click on network, we're actually given a visual representation of our current network, and then underneath that, we've got some more graphs and stuff. So let's go ahead and jump in to configuration on the WAN so we can get that up and running. So I'm going to click on Network WAN, and we're taken into our Ethernet interfaces. Now, in the previous video, I talked about how IGB0 was our WAN interface, and we can see that it is not currently online. And before we make it online, we just want to take a look at the rest of these kind of configurations and make sure everything's going to be as expected. I'm going to start by looking down at our network addresses. So you can see that management LAN that was configured, and that was configured as part of the CLI initial setup, and we did change that to 192.168.1.1, and we associated that with our LAN interface, or IGB3. So this is by default how that is configured. If we wanted to configure that after the fact, we could do that here, but you can see that that management LAN is defined on IGB3. We also have above that the uplink. So the uplink is what is going to do that WAN connection for us, and I actually needed to edit this so I can change our uplink speed. So I'm going to go ahead and choose edit on our uplink, and I am going to set my particular download and upload speed to 900 megabits per second. So I could also change which Ethernet interface this applies to. I could set a VLAN. It's more likely that you're going to be utilizing a static IP address for this connection in a lot of environments, but in my environment, my ISP actually will not give me a static IP address. So right now I am doing DHCP, but if you needed to specify that static address, you could totally do that here. If you needed to set some PPPoE, there is another section for that. But that is what I needed to configure here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to update that. And then, so this uplink, and it's named uplink, is established to Ethernet IGB0. It is DHCP, and we can see now that we've got the speed updated on this. So we can see IGB0 is still not online. We can edit that and take a look at that. We've got the port. We can specify the media type, the MTU, the native networks, and things like that. Everything else here looks to be as I need it. I am going to go ahead and cancel this. I'm going to go ahead and install that connection. It's currently not connected. I'm going to go ahead and install that, and then I will come back and we will take a look. And with plugging that in, we can see now that both IGB0 is showing online, as is our uplink. We're not shown the DHCP IP address here. Actually, if we click on network, we can see the uplink IP that is listed here. I am blurring part of it out so that I don't give away my my address. But if we go back to that uplink connection, if you weren't able to get an IP address, you could actually choose restart DHCP here, and it would re-request that dynamic address. With the WAN connection online, we are doing network address translation. If we go under network NAT, we will see actually that we don't have any configurations defined, but if we click on the help button, we do see that the RWG will automatically enable NAT from subnets that are configured with the RFC 1918 specified private addresses. So that explains why my connections are still working, and we haven't defined any NAT rules. If we go under instruments and we look at our NAT assignments, again, I can see the IPs in our NAT IP and the MAC address and the host names. I'm going to blur some of the NAT IP stuff out just so I don't give away that address, but we can see that we do have that stuff configured here, as well as our uplink NAT pool. So let's take a look at creating another interface that we can utilize for the lab network that I'm going to spin off as part of this. So underneath network LAN, I'm going to configure another network address. So I'm going to click create new here. I am going to call it lab network. I am going to select the interface is IGB1. This is currently an unused interface. If we can see here, it is offline, but I'm associating it to my lab network. I'm then going to set the address for this network. I'm going to set 10.10.10.1/24, and I actually want to create a DHCP pool for this as well, and we can do that from right under the scaffold by selecting this check mark here that will go ahead and create a pool for the entire subnet. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And you can see that we've got that network address listed here. It is tied to IBG1. If we go under services DHCP, we should see a pool here for that lab network. And we do, and it starts with 10.10.10.2 all the way to 10.10.10.254. We could set up some fixed hosts for either of these DHCP pools here if we wanted to create some static entries, as well as define other DHCP options for any of these pools. We could do that all from here as well. What I want to do now is I want to go ahead and get that interface up and make it so that we can connect in some of these 10.10.10 devices. After making that connection for IGB1 into my lab network, we can see that it is now online. And I probably should already have some devices that have requested DHCP. So if I go under Instruments, Mac DHCP DNS, I should be able to see some entries, and I do, for my 10 network. So I've got some APs and some switches, and I have a VMware host on that environment, a Smart Zone in there as well. So I will say that by default, there is a rule that prevents communication across these subnets. So if I am to try to communicate to that 10 network from the device I'm currently on, it will fail. So if I bring over a command prompt, I will be able to ping the gateway, but if I try to ping any of the other addresses on this network, it will not work. What I need to do is actually go into the definitions if I want to put in a bypass, and let's show you how that is done. All right, we're under identities definitions, and what we actually needed to do is define a new WAN target for this lab network that I want to add into my bypass so that I can have some cross communication. So I'm going to go ahead and click create new under my WAN targets. I am going to call this lab network bypass, and I am going to specify the address that I want to bypass. So I can do the entire network if I wanted to do a /.1/24, or I could do a wildcard, or I could just list all the specific individual IPs that I wanted to do. Let's go ahead and just do .2 for now, and we can look to change that here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and create this, and if I do a search for my lab bypass, I see that here, lab network bypass, and it is just this target. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I needed to go up to policies, packet filters, and we have a default that blocks subnets. So we have a default policy blocking subnets. I need to go into this subnets filter and edit it. And I need to throw in a destination whitelist for a WAN target. So if I just start typing here, I should be able to pick my lab network bypass. So let me go ahead and choose that. And as I select that, you can see that it adds it over here to the right with a red X next to it. So if I wanted to remove that lab network bypass, I could certainly do that. So let me go ahead and update this subnet. Let me bring up my ping, and you can see that we are pinging. So we've got our pings to .2 successfully. Let's go ahead and try to ping .3. And we are not able to ping .3. Let's go ahead and jump over to our instruments for our DHCP. Make sure .3 was a real address. I feel like it was. Yeah, it is definitely a real address. So let's go ahead and go back into our identity definitions, and let's edit that WAN target list to just be the whole lab network for right now, just to show that this thing is working the way we think it should work. So I'm going to edit that. I'm going to change this to .1/24, and I'm going to update. And that really should be all I have to do. I shouldn't have to go and reapply that. It's already applied by name. So if I try that .3 ping again, it might take a second, but we should have that. And there we go. We have that. So that is the default filter. That is how you add a destination. You add the destination under the identity, and then you go and update the actual packet filter policy, that default subnet block or block subnets policy. So I think that's going to do it for this video. Join us for the next one. We're going to talk about lags. We're going to talk about some VLAN configuration, and then from there, we're going to expand into adding some of the RUCKUS Smart Zone and RUCKUS ICX device integration.